everybody. Welcome to the United Stands. I'm Mark Goldbridge, and you're welcome to the United Stand. I'm joined by Terry. How you doing, pal?
I'm very well, mate. Very well. Some exciting news. A lot of challenge as well. So yeah, loads going on with Man United at the minute, mate. But me personally, very, very good indeed.
Good. Well, look, I want to get into it. We've had the interview, we've had the protests, and we've had the new stadium images. I think the first thing I want to get into, because I mean, this will fly by. There's so many people who are going to get involved in it. How does it work? What next? Is it a master plan? Is it a disaster plan? Since this morning, one of the things I really want to talk about is how we're going to pay for this. But I had to listen to it a few times, but it's been confirmed by a journalist that Omar Barada said we want to be the most profitable club in 3 years' time, and then we can invest that money into the stadium. I find that incredible. And this is like where I look at the interview from last night and I think, look, Gary Neville is doing the voiceover for the Man United official promo video. He's got a conflict of interest. Somebody's even done a picture of Hotel Football, and apparently it's getting an extension as part of all this. So, I don't care what anybody says. He's on the committee. But so he's not going to start going, how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? Because it was a scripted interview. But that is interesting, Terry. I mean, first of all, you're quite excited about the stadium. Let's start on a positive. Second of all, we've both worked in finance. How is he going to pay this? And what do you think about... I think there needs to be some scrutiny now about how we're going to pay for this, because ultimately, I know how we can pay for it, but there won't be a lot in the pot for Amrim. And I think that's the question.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm excited about it. I actually quite like the new design. I was a little worried it would just be a kind of toilet bowl shape like everybody else's. And it may look that way if you took the shell off as an example, but
it's a net, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like a big. Do you know what the thing is?
We won't miss. We'll definitely be hitting the net. Delo's crosses are going in. They're gonna go outside the thing and hit the net.
I hear you, and I've seen that sort of these images they've generated of what it looks like at night. The three prongs. I like the trident. I love all of that. When I grew up as a kid in the East End of London, they built the Millennium Dome. And to this day, I love how that looks, even though it's 25 years old. So I really like the design. And you're always going to find people that don't, but you're never going to please everybody with the design as an example. So I've seen a few people on the stadium say it's not the stadium I grew up with. It's not the local area I grew up with. And I understand that, especially for locals. However, the stadium and the ground now is not what it was 50 years ago. And what it was 50 years ago is not what it looked like 100 years ago. So there's always going to be change and innovation, and I'm all for that. There's the element of having the 100,000 seater stadium, double the size of the Etihad, 60,000 more seats than Stamford Bridge, around 40,000 more than Tottenham, Arsenal, Liverpool. And I think as a Man United fan, that is something to be proud of. We're at our lowest moment, but yet it just shows how much bigger we are compared to our rivals. But that's where I agree the scrutiny comes in around, well, how are you going to fund it? Is it going to impact the team? And I think for me, the first thing to call out, and I think it's very important to do it on the biggest Man United platform in the world, it's been reiterated multiple times by the club, by the local MPs and the government that taxpayer funds will not be used for the direct build of the stadium, but for the regeneration of the local area, which I hate to point out to the haters. Well, I love to point out to the haters. That's literally the government's job, is to use taxpayer money to improve the local amenities, facilities, transport, etc. So that's not how it's being funded. I think it will be funded in a combination of ways. Owners can pump in their own money for infrastructure without it affecting PSR. So they can't pay the debts off. They can't pay staff. They can't buy players endlessly, unlimitedly with their own money, but they can build the infrastructure. So I think there could be some more investment. Be interesting to see whether or not some of that leads to more ownership of Ineos. There also will be, I can't imagine there not being outside investment. I can't imagine there not be outside investors that want to put money in. And maybe it will be a case of, if they help fund the stadium, they'll get the tenure on, building apartment blocks or whatever else it may be. There'll be an element of that going on. There'll be sponsorships. I know United fans might not want it, but I think you'll probably find we're going to end up selling naming rights, most likely, so I don't know, Tesla, but for an absorbent amount of money. there's also the potential, if we're not going to build it on the site of Old Trafford and we're building it adjacent, you'll probably find that we might sell off the land of Old Trafford to help fund the build of the new stadium. So I think there's multiple ways. What we've got to hope for is that we don't take out a £2 billion piece of debt. And I don't think it'll ever be that high. But yeah, I think it will be a combination of those things, Mark, if I'm being honest. Looking at it from a financial background, I imagine it being a combination of those things. Maybe 200 or 300 million of debt, maybe 300 or 400 million from the owners, maybe 500 million from investors, and maybe another 500 million from a stadium sponsor to kind of spread that cost out is what I think will happen.
Yeah, and look, I think that we shouldn't pop the enthusiasm of different opinions. Like, I don't like the stadium. I don't like the design. It will grow, and in reality, you will get used to it. Like, you know, I remember my missus coming home with a haircut a few months ago, and I hated it. And after 2 months, you know, after a couple of days, you get used to it. So that stadium, it's irrelevant. It's not the stadium designer's fault. He is not a Glazer. He has designed something that he thinks befits that area. It's very separate to me. I just don't like it visually at the moment, but it probably will grow on me. And some people do like it, and I think that's great for them. What worries me is, well, one, I don't think we'd bloody fill it at the moment. I really don't think we'd fill 100,000 at the moment. They've got to. But then that you could flip that into a positive and say, if you're going to fill 100,000 capacity stadium, you don't do it with an injured Luke Shaw and Mason Mount and, you know, the players that we've got at the moment. So you know, play the film and people will come. So I genuinely do not think Ineos will put any money in because it's not Ineos and they've got their own problems. I think we will do what Arsenal did and what Spurs did. And I want to get into that and to how that impacts Manchester United and Ruben Amorim, because I think you messaged me this morning telling me to stop being so miserable. And I messaged back saying I'm miserable because of the Glazers. And I think that's probably, look, everyone's going to be thinking their own thing. There's going to be excitement. There's going to be frustration. I think this is going to be what Spurs and Arsenal did. And I think when you build a stadium, I don't have a problem with this. I think this will be 2 billion borrowed, paid back over a period of time based on revenue you make from that stadium. I ain't got a problem with that. It's like taking a mortgage out. I wouldn't have a problem with it if we didn't already have £1 billion worth of debt. But ultimately, 5 years to build it is what we're hearing. The guy who's designed it said that normally it would take 10 years, but they're going to use the canals to bring in the infrastructure. Old Trafford will keep playing in right until the day before it opens. So we don't have to lose revenue from Old Trafford, which makes sense. And then we'll open it up in about 5 years' time. And then I'd say 15 years to pay it back, the debt of the borrowing of the money, which is basically what Spurs have done. It's what Arsenal have done. The problem with that for me is that I feel like I've got a lifetime sentence from the Glazers now. Because I've had 20 years of the Glazers and I'm definitely getting another 20 years. That's 40 years of the Glazers. And I just think whether it's in 20 years' time or now, I will always look at the drop-off and go, we are so unlucky to have the Glazers owning Man United when you compare us to where we were before and where other clubs are. We really have been given a life sentence here. And they are just the worst type of owners and they're not going to go anywhere. So I think regardless of how excited people are about stadiums and positivity, nobody can tell me that this ain't going to take years and years and it still might not work. Getting Man United back to the top. A lot of it's about... Yeah. I don't think it's been scrutinised enough, Terry. I think, you know, when Omar Barada, let's talk about that for a moment, when he says we're going to be the most profitable club in 3 years' time, I've worked in finance, you've worked in finance. You got Sir Jim Radcliffe saying yesterday, the club nearly went broke, we've got no money. I've got to find 90 million in the summer for transfers I've already paid for. I mean, you got Omar Barada and his Operation 28 talking about being the most profitable club in the world. I don't know whether he means the world or Manchester or his street or the Premier League. But Liverpool have just made £90 million in the Champions League already. We're not going to be in that. So how are we going to be more profitable than these clubs that are earning shitloads more money? I just don't know how we do that in 3 years. But yeah, that's something I want to know, really.
I suppose that the question about the profitability part, I heard him say that. And my first thought was this, though. Most football clubs don't actually make a profit. So you could... I was looking at the Spurs have got good financial results, but it's like a loss before taxes, etc. But after taxes, they I think they lost like 86 million. So if you actually look at
Arsenal did as well, didn't they? They weren't far off the losing money as well.
So there's the profits from operations before EBITDA, and then you look at after losses. So it often depends on what people are referring to, but most clubs make a loss. So from their perspective, they might be looking at it and thinking, well, if we can only we might make a £5 million loss. That might make us the most profitable team in the top 6, as an example. And
but he did say they want to use those profits to invest in the stadium. So
yes.
You'd think they want to be making at least 50 million profit, which
I think, sorry. No, I get what you mean. And I don't necessarily know whether and this is where I think the journalists need to do better jobs by asking questions. So it absolutely could, you could be absolutely spot on. And how much I would have asked the question. So what kind of profits are you aiming to make? And how, if it's 20 million a year, I mean, that's a drop in the ocean to a £2 billion build. What we might find is that if we can reduce the losses so that we're suddenly nowhere near a PSR problem, so we can keep spending, maybe then you can take out a loan that the new profits or the new reduction of losses can help to maintain. And what I would be looking at doing if I was in their position, because someone in the comments said already, you can't sell the naming rights before a stadium is built. Not strictly true, because Barca have sold off a lot of things before their new stadium's open. But what you may be able to do is a kind of interest-only style loan that is so it's minimal payments back during the build. And then once it's built, you start selling off the naming rights or elements to investors, and you use that cash injection to pay the debt down. So like the old-fashioned way of doing an offset mortgage, which used to work when house prices weren't extortionate. So I agree with you. Questions have to be asked. I like the fact that they've been very public about this. I like the fact that, and I know we'll get onto the interview as well, we've been screaming for 20 years. We want information. We want updates. We want to hear your opinion. Doesn't mean I agree with everything Sir Jim said yesterday. Doesn't mean I don't have questions about, well, how do we make this work? But I do feel this is a much better scenario than 20 years of not knowing what's going on. On the Glazer staying, I did some content on it this morning on the Football Terrace, and I just think I'm so not at peace. That's the wrong word. It makes me sound accepting. I'm just so I'm completely over the idea of the Glazers going, in the sense of I don't think it's going to happen short, medium, or long term. Whether that be with or without.
Agreed.
So 5 years ago, and I kind of blame myself for this. I definitely went about it the wrong way. I was far too aggressive. I was far too derogatory towards other Man United fans when I spoke about pulling money away from the club. Instead of saying, I did this whole, if you give money, you're a Glazer thing. And that was my anger and frustration towards the Glazers overspilling. And I should have gone about it differently. Not that I believe that I could have changed the fortunes of Man United. I'm not that arrogant, but maybe it would have started some earlier conversations that would have grown from that point with people with more influence than me. But I just felt that when you could see United fans were never going to pull their money, were never going to give up their season tickets. And Sir Jim said in the interview last night, the fans that buy the tickets, that pay the TV subscriptions and buy the shirts, they're the 3 biggest earners. I don't think football fans are willing to get rid of those 3 things for one reason or another. I'm just at a point where I don't think the Glazers go, or they don't go without making obscene amounts of money. So then I'm in this position of, well, do we stand still as a football club in a rotting stadium that needs rejuvenating? Or do we push forward and develop the club? Yes, they'll make more profits if they sell us, and that's gutting. But at the same time, is that better than the club standing still and going backwards? Is it better to try to innovate, try to rejuvenate, go down this road with Ineos that may turn us into a better football team? Or do we just stand still doing the same thing? Because I feel like that's worse. And the Glazers might make more money out of it, which infuriates me, but at least the club's moving forward with it. And I don't know if there is a right or a wrong answer. I'm definitely not sitting here and saying everyone that's skeptical is wrong, because I think we're right to be skeptical. I also see it as, if we just stand still and let our traffic keep falling down, no outside influence coming in, I just feel that, and I know there is a train of thought, well, if Sir Jim didn't come in, we'd have run out of money, the Glazers would have been forced to sell. But forced to sell to who? We would have gone into administration, we might have got a points deduction and got relegated. No guarantees that you get a brilliant owner then comes in because we're cheaper. You might actually find more Cowboys that walked away last time because we were more expensive came in. And I'm just at this point where we don't know what we don't know. And I feel that the best way forward from the reality of our situation is to try something new and to try and force our way out of this. I just don't think protest by themselves or hope that some billionaire pays £7 billion to the Glazers is going to happen. I just don't think anyone's going to, especially with this current state of the club. Maybe there's more chance of a £7 billion bid when this new stadium is halfway through being built. Maybe then an Elon Musk figure, I'm just thinking of a billionaire, thinks, well, actually, now it's a better proposition because I can buy it and it's just ready to go day one. I haven't got to be the evil guy that makes 400 people redundant and knocks down Old Trafford. I'm just the guy picking up the pieces. So I'm at that point where I understand the scrutiny, but I also think we have to move forward at the same time, if that makes sense.
No, I think it's the voice of acceptance. Maybe you become desensitized. Maybe it's apathy. And I can certainly relate to that today, having been through quite a battle in my head for the last 12 hours, just sort of like trying to find a pathway forward, because I agree the Glazers aren't going anywhere. If anything, they're more entrenched in this football club than they've ever been. Say what you like about Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the local government, but they are safety in numbers now. You're not just trying to remove the Glazers. You're trying to remove the Glazers who are holding hands with Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Manchester United Football Club, the local government, the national government. This is Manchester United is owned by the Glazers. It's not owned by Sir Jim Ratcliffe. Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Gary and everybody else and Sebastian Coe, this is what's happening to Manchester, and it's amazing. The Glazers are entrenched in that, and they've got safety in numbers. Then they're not going to get removed. What I would say is that you've got to do you at the end of the day. And the way I look at it is that I don't mind the criticism. I don't mind the people saying you're negative. I don't mind the people who are backing Sir Jim Ratcliffe. That's life. God, if you can't deal with other people having a different opinion, then you're going to struggle in life. But one thing I will say is that, my conscience is clear. I wanted Qatar over Sir Jim Ratcliffe, and I lost. I wanted the Glazers out and the debt gone, and I lost. And I think we're further away from a win than we've ever been. I think we truly are lost. And I don't think the Glazers are going anywhere for 20 years. And the way I look at it now is that we've been sentenced to another 20 years, the Glazers. We have won Champions Leagues under the Glazers, and we have won Premier Leagues under the Glazers, and it never stopped me not wanting them to go. But what I would say is I don't see Sir Jim Ratcliffe as a knight in shining armor. I see him as a puppet to the Glazers. I see him as a facilitator to the Glazers. I see him as a shield, as Gary Neville said. I see him as a buffer. And I also think what he said about we were so close to going bankrupt and almost trying to put himself forward as the saviour. I just think that's a big load of bollocks. I just think in obvious sense that if Sir Jim Ratcliffe had known that the club was going to go bankrupt, that's actually a better bargaining tool. So why did he do such a shit deal? Like if he wanted the whole club, why did he do a small deal with the Glazers? And also, he could have just not done the deal and Qatar would have stepped in or somebody would have stepped in and bought us. So I think that this pathway, look, I know the Glazers masterminded this from 2018. They just needed somebody to come and front it. We've got the documents of them sending it to Trafford Council in 2018 saying, look at this land, look at the regeneration. It would be great for Manchester. It wasn't Andy Burnham. It wasn't Sir Jim Ratcliffe. It wasn't Gary Neville. It wasn't Sebastian Coe. It was the Glazers. And it's there for anybody who wants to read it. The document is there. They've always wanted this. Sir Jim Ratcliffe works with the Glazers. And I think people need to understand that they work together in a professional relationship to make a lot of money, to try and make Man United successful again. And we, whether we're going kicking or screaming, are going to have to, and I agree with Terry on this, we're just going to have to just live it because we're not going to change it. Like protests aren't going to change it.
I agree.
It's just not, we're just not going to change it. And I think that that's very, very sad. And it will take people time to get used to that. The question has to come back to, how are you going to fund this? Because money-wise, on one hand, there's no money for transfers in January. On the other hand, we're going to get profit and spend it on the stadium. Well, what's available for transfers? Because this team, Amrim's going to be, we're going to go on the cycle of sacking Amrim again very, very soon because he's not going to be able to be successful with what he has. He needs about £500 million himself. So do you see a scenario where he's going to get that $500 million and we're going to be profitable. Because my concern is they talk about profitability, but it's all to do with cuts. We've halved our workforce. We're raising ticket prices. We're sacking people here. We're cutting there. At some point, as you and I know, if you save money by not having baked beans in your shopping list, you're not having beans on toast. Never. So again, I don't think we have enough meat on the bones to start going, oh, it's going to be great. We will have a stadium. We're definitely going to have a stadium, but Arsenal have a stadium and stop winning league titles.
So yeah, listen, I think that's a really, really good point. We may not even start this build for 4 or 5 years. Halfway through last year, I went and got sort of planning permission and got architectural drawings.
You're building a stadium here.
There's a little football pitch in the back garden, but I'm not really doing an extension on my house. This is why I'm maybe a little bit on a personal level. I'm basically knocking my house down and rebuilding it. It's attached to another building, so it can't be completely knocked down. So we have to do it a certain way. But I had the permission done, and I didn't have the funds to do it, but I got the permission. And the only thing I had to do is dig some footings, and then that way the plans last for a long period of time. So I didn't need all the money when I was putting in the planning permission and sort of doing the architectural drawings. I didn't need the money up front to be able to do that. So I do think there's an element here of we're talking about what we're going to be doing in the future, and we can build to that point. So financially, I don't think this is going to impact transfers in the short term. But I also think
just on that, Terry. I mean, I'm going to carry on, but apparently, people are talking like 5 years from today. I think it's 5 years from when they start. I don't think it's 5 years from today. I think it could be like 2032 before this is built. Well, probably
exactly.
Probably 2031. Maybe
you're right. They might not start building it for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then it's going to take 5 years to. And you got to remember, it isn't just what you'll get, and this is where I think conversations are so important. It's not an incompetence why it will take 5 years. It's the entire regeneration of the area will take that amount of time. For instance, I was living in the East End of London when London 2012 was being built, and there was elements of the Olympic surroundings that were open 2 years, like the Westfield shopping centre and everything around it. That opened 2 years, that opened in 2010, well before the Olympics was on. So the 5-year build is probably an indication of the entire regeneration of the area. As an example, that may not even start for another. There might be reasons why it can't even start. There could be logistical reasons. There might all different things where they can't just suddenly shut down roads. And I think Manchester's redirecting train lines. So there's lots that has to happen. That's nothing to do with the club's new stadium prior to this build. So yeah,
there might be opposition from people about why all this money from the government's going into that area in Manchester, which is clearly going to help.
And I'm sure you'll find
because you can't build that. I'll tell you one thing: they can't build that stadium. They can't justify that stadium unless they've got the regeneration around it.
The regeneration, and
you're right to say we'll build our own stadium, but it's a little bit spin because it's like we'll build our own stadium. They won't fucking build that stadium unless they know all that stuff's going around it.
I think that's where the club are being. I look at that as smart business, though, because the club understand that if you can create an area that is attractive to people to come, because there's restaurants and bowling alleys, thousands of people live there. What that means for, and you look at the way we're building the stadium. If you look at that one of the Trident things, it looks like there's going to be some kind of sky restaurant, or I don't know if you've been to. You get those things that go up and down, and you can look out of them. It's almost
Seattle's got it, hasn't it?
Yes, Seattle's got something like that. And obviously, what they want to do is build the stadium in an environment that attracts people that may not even be going to Old Trafford. Then you can sell more museum tours, stadium tours, skywalks. All of that generates money. Man United also want to be a place that is attractive to host, because it looks like Tyson Fury is going to box there in the current Old Trafford. Man United want to do what Spurs are doing, which is, have Beyonce and Lady Gaga and I don't know, Sabrina Carpenter. Is that a modern day person? I'm old. They want to have these people there, and some people don't think
I've never heard of that last one.
It's Sabrina Carpenter. When I went to Germany in the summer, the young lads that went out there with us, they were raving about her, and I assume she's a big pop star, but I think these things are important. And I think what Spurs do from a business perspective is amazing. The only time, and again, this is where people, when I say I'm accepting of it, I'm accepting of the fact that I don't think the Glazers are going to go. What I'm not accepting of is not scrutinizing them. So say we build this stadium, the revenues are flying. We've got the pop concerts, the boxing events, the tourism, you know, the museum tours are up by 500% because there's now thousands of people in that area every day. Then what I expect to see is debts reduced, people employed, brilliant squads, renewing the contracts of our best players, innovation, investment into the women's team. So where people think, oh, Terry Fluid, you're accepting of everything just staying as it isn't that. But for me, it's, well, if you're generating all this new income, if you're growing things, I expect the club to then therefore get more investment and move forward. So it isn't just a case of, we've got a new stadium, I'm happy, I'm no longer going to challenge what goes on. No, my scrutiny will stay the same. The only element that I just feel is done, because I'm the same as you. I wanted the Qataris over Sajim. I wanted a full buyout outright. I lost that. I didn't win. The problem is, at the same time,
you've got to move on, you've got to adapt.
You've got to. I can't sit here every day and be angry about things that
I don't know. I do a good job of that.
Power and control. No, you do.
I've made a career out of that.
I think that's why you're more grey than me. Do you know what I'm saying? I think that's. But no, it's just. But I was the same, and I'm learning as a person, and it is a lot of it's my own health. I'm not even going to lie. I'm not even trying to make this into a different conversation. I've just learned I've got to let go of things, and I still believe, by the way, if every Man United fan gives up their season tickets, we all cancel our subscriptions, we stop buying kits, I would still believe we could force them out.
Well,
but what
listen to this.
I'm also accepting of is I don't think we're going to get enough people to do that.
I just want to read some of the comments, and then I'm going to come back to a question for you anyway. But just from the live chat, I've got a few super chats to read, but this is from the live chat, which I do read because there is some really good points in there. Old says, I'm sick and tired of the protests and people saying they're not going to do anything. We need to get multiple game calls off to make them feel. And look, just I'm not disrespecting the protests. We all support the protests. Most of us do. It was brilliant what they did on Sunday, and obviously United have hit with their PR straight afterwards. You know, this is the Glazer-onomics. This is what they do. You lose a game, we're buying a player. Protests happen. Look at the new kit. Look at the new stadium. So look, I completely agree with that. And if you want to get the Glazers out or Sir Jim Radcliffe out, you get games called off. But people don't want to go that far. And so, you know, the things that are going to hurt the Glazers, it's not that it's impossible to get them out. It's just the road you've got to go down to get them out. And you're asking a lot of people to do that. And a lot of people got arrested last time because of the Liverpool stuff and stuff like that. So it's not as easy as saying, get the game called off. If you want to be involved in that, everyone, you know, get involved in that, but not a lot of people are. Glenn C says it's not just getting the Glazers to sell up 30% of the club on the New York Stock Exchange and they want the same price as the Glazers shares or they block the deal, says Glenn C. More debt, says Sir J.K. Worthing. Great. How much to fix Old Trafford? Joey says they added nets to the stadium because they need assistant to catch Delo's crosses. We will get 90 points in 2028 to win the Premier League, says Umzi. And Mark, unlike Spurs, United have always been creative. If I said to you, Terry, and everyone listening, 5 years ago, almost to the day, was when we went into COVID lockdown. That feels like a lifetime. It's 5 years. This stadium, some people are saying 2030. We're into March of 2025. So the earliest it's going to get done is summer 2025. And we better start building in the next 2 months. So I think you're optimistic. Maybe the start of 2030 season, 5 years, 5.5 years from now. 5 years. Are we basically writing it off then, Terry? Is that what we're doing now? We're writing off another 5 years because I think we probably are. My fear has been that 5 years is a long time. As I said, Liverpool are going to make 90 million this year from the Champions League, which means Arsenal aren't far off that. Chelsea are going to make 50 million from playing in that shitty Club World Cup. They'll be in the Champions League next year. They'll be earning 90 million. So over 5 years, these clubs are going to be in the Champions League. We're probably not. They're going to be pocketing hundreds of millions of profit, pure profit. It's all right saying in 5 years we're going to have a stadium. Then when it's there, you still got to earn year one of the benefit of it. And so you could be 5 to 10 years before you're making the profits. And we don't have the answers, but this is one of the questions I'd be saying to Sir Jim, amongst many, is I see what you're doing. And I can see that this amazing stadium and this amazing area in Manchester is going to make a lot of money and it's going to be really like the best stadium in England and everything like that. But how long to make the money to succeed? And everyone else is going to be watching us going, well, crack on. because we're eating now, and I don't see a way how it's not writing off 5 years. And if you're in your 70s and 80s, I mean, hopefully you'll make it to your 90s, because I don't actually think you're going to see Man United winning anything major. I mean, we've already heard about Europa League plans for the next 4 years to survive. It does sound like, well, we need Ruben Amorim to be Sir Alex Ferguson for a start, but Sir Alex had a lot of bloody money. I remember that. So is it writing off for 5 years in your mind?
I understand that train of thought, and it could certainly end up going that way. I'm not going to get up. I think these conversations about balance, and I don't think it's impossible. I saw a lot of people scrutinize Sir Jim yesterday when he mentioned the players that are going to cost us £89 million this summer. Most of those players, I think the majority of us would agree, are all probably going to be sold, but yet we're still paying for them. And this is also why, this is how we stop it being a 5-year problematic cycle. As I saw a few people say, oh, Sir Jim's calling out players he's got to pay for that he bought years back, like no other club is doing that. But I think what people are missing out the fact on is that we keep doing this every 18 months, 2 years, 3 years. We spend 400, 500, 600 million on a squad. It isn't good enough because there's no clear direction of style of play. It's a bit of a Frankenstein squad. We've overpaid for lots of players. Anthony being a standout example that we could have got for 25, 30 million. We ended up paying 70 million extra for. It doesn't work. We then change direction again, and you have to start that whole process of trying to build a new squad, which means investing more and more money. It's why we're running out of cash. How this doesn't become a 5-year write-off is by sticking with Ruben Amorim and or the philosophy and style and needing that particular profile. So that way, the hope is you spend 150 million this summer, 150, 200 million the following year. But then maybe the time you get to the third summer, you don't need to go out and spend as much because that squad is maturing and it's coming together. And that's how we've got to do it. That's how, look, you look at City. City are now going to spend big again. But City went through a 2 or 3 year period where they were spending a lot less money than everybody else. They were making a lot through the sale of players. But it's because they spent all that money 6 years ago when the 50s, 60s, and 70 million pounds were seen as expensive transfers when they were bringing in John Stones and KDB. They built that core group and they grew. Listen, they got not fortunate. Haaland's deal is 50 million on paper. It was 100 million when you look at the agent costs. And that was all to do with the buyout clauses. It probably would have cost them 200 million had those clauses not existed. But by and large, they started spending less than Man United, than Arsenal, than Chelsea for a 2 or 3 year period. Now they're going to spend big again. And that's, for me, a big focus.
Where is this money coming from for United to spend?
So where the money's going to come from? And again, this is the one element of the interview that I liked and didn't like, because they focused a lot on the free lunches. And people could take it as, well, he's saying because we're taking away free lunches, we can now afford players. Players cost 70 million. We're only saving
he's
1
got to pay
million.
that 90, hasn't he? He's owned up to that. He's got to pay the 90. If you miss out on Europe, you're going to lose 50. So he's 140 down before he spends 150 on players.
I think what you've got to look at though is it's the amount of the wages are the biggest commitment in that period, more so than the transfer fees. The clubs focus a lot more on the wages. So if you just look at I think we've saved around 20 to 30 million pound already under Ineos through players that have left or will leave. And I think that's an area where they're going to save money that can generate the ability to buy. So Casemiro leaving, that's 300. That's like 1.4 million pound a month. So over the course of the next 12 months, you're looking at sort of 15 million quid. As we know, you could take that savings and buy a player for 45, 50 million pounds because you amortize it. Yes, they've got salary as well. Where it becomes problematic is a little bit like Chelsea's scenario. Chelsea have spent a lot of money up front and they amortized it over a long period of time. Where that's problematic is in 2 or 3 years' time, if they need to spend that amount again because the project's failed, because they're going to be paying off all that current debt and they've got to add more on top. So I do think there will be money to spend, but what my focus is more on is, can we actually go through 2 or 3 summers where 60, 70% of our signings work out, so we're not every 2 years saying, okay, we need another striker. Bloody hell.
Or another manager.
We've bought 4 new centre-backs in 2 years and we need another 3. What's going on here? We need to get to a point where a lot of our buys, we're going, great, we've got a left back for the next 4, 5, 6 years here. We've got a striker for the next 4, 5, 6 years. Our midfield looks set. And you can always add more to it. But we need to get to a point where we want to buy a player or two as opposed to, bloody hell, we need 7 or 8 new players. That for me is where the focus has to be over the next 5 years. I don't think we'll start this build of the stadium for at least 2 to 3 years from this point, personally, out of any of our own money. I think it will be a while until they actually start doing it, not even due to our own finances. I think there'll be elements to do, as you say, there'll be challenge. There'll be all sorts of, there'll be some very blue parts of Manchester writing letters today to the council to say, we don't want this. Think about the birds, think about the pigeons, think about the noise. So yeah, for me, it's about the recruitment over the next 2 to 3 windows, including January's, being not perfect, because that's impossible, but a massive improvement on what we've done so far. Where I would start to be really worried, really panic, is if in 2 summers' time, we still feel like our squad is bang average, the build's about to start on the new stadium, and the revenue is barely increased, or the operating costs have not gone down as well. So you're looking at, well, hang on, there's no money left. We need another squad rebuild. The new stadium starting. That's when I would be in a position of panic. So between now and then, I'm going to scrutinize in the same way that you have, but I'm just going to be open-minded to the fact. For me, if we get the recruitment right, and I feel that if we do have a set plan under Amorim, we stick to buying that profile of player, and everybody for the first time in 12 years is pulling in that same direction, I believe there's a much bigger chance that our transfer market success increases. That will then free up more money for this build. But if we recruit poorly, if we do a terrible job in that space, if we keep changing managers every 18 months, then we will be in financial Armageddon. There's no doubt about it, mate. No doubt at all.
I think if you're in an industry where you can say in 5 to 10 years' time we're going to be one of the best teams in the world, you're probably okay based on what they're announcing. You probably are, but I don't like that. I'm thinking about Thursday night. I'm thinking about Friday morning being out of Europe and being fucking fuming. So football is a results-based industry. You send 11 people out onto the pitch and it changes your emotion from the next day to the previous day. Football is about the now. It's not about in 5 years' time. So I look at it and my prediction is that I think that there's a lot of things that have got to go right for Ineos and Sir Jim. And based on that interview yesterday, I thought he came across as somebody that had bitten off more than he can chew. I think he was surprised by how much criticism he's getting. I thought his football knowledge came across as quite low, but you can cover that off with people who know what they're on about. And in time, we will see if those people do know what they're on about. But the finances of it terrify me, if I'm being completely honest, because in January, they literally didn't even spend 5 million to bring a loan player in because they couldn't afford it. And now look at the mess of the team. And he said, I'm comfortable making unpopular decisions around what upsets fans if it's for the betterment of the club. I look at the summer transfer window and I look at last summer transfer window, and I think they made it very clear that they won't spend money that they haven't got. So we didn't get Mazraoui and De Ligt until they'd sold Wan-Bissaka, and that's why they didn't go on the pre-season tour. We didn't get Agate until we'd sold McTominay, and that's why Agate wasn't fit until October, because he hadn't really had a pre-season. So in a summer where we're already hearing Mateta's price is going up because they know we want him and everybody knows we're desperate, I see a summer transfer window where we're already scraping the bottom of the barrel because, let's be honest, people are going to go to Liverpool or Arsenal or Chelsea ahead of us because of the Champions League, and they're more cash rich. Also, when we do home in on a target, I think clubs are going to go, well, you're desperate, hike the price. Or if they want one of our players, well, you're desperate, drop the price. So I think that it's unrealistic in my mind, and I hope people are right when they predict that we'll be okay. I think we're going to have a really difficult summer transfer window. And that's not, I mean, I'm still hoping we'll win the Europa League, and I still think we'll have a difficult transfer window, which means I think we'll have a difficult season, and we'll have another 9 months of this. And God knows what that will bring, because there's certain voices in our fan base and there's certain media outlets that haven't got the mental capacity to back a manager in circumstances like this. So we'll start with the Amorim out. He needs to change his system, which Ineos will have to resist, which will put more pressure on them. And then next summer, if we're not in Europe again, I just wonder where we need 500 million now for that squad. Forget the stadium. And I don't know where that's going to come from. But I do know the Premier League has never been so competitive. And I do know that I don't see a drop-off from Liverpool, Arsenal anytime soon. Chelsea, Newcastle, Villa, I think are very interesting projects. The only drop off I can see is if Man City get done. So I just look at it and I go, I look at it and I go, yeah, 5 to 10 years, this could be great. But over the next 5 years, I can't see a strategy at all to get Man United back. What I will say is that doesn't mean I'm right, Terry's right, or wrong. Because you look at Leicester winning the league, you look at Nottingham Forest last year to this year, you look at Bournemouth. If you can get the right collection of players playing the right style of football, you can defy the odds. But that's even more concerning because we don't have incredibly, and I really actually just thought this. There's a lot of things I think in that interview that could have been asked. But you know, quite rightly, everyone's obsessed about debt and this, that, and the other. Why wasn't he probed about this? Why wasn't he probed about that? Another question I would have loved to have asked, and I don't think it was a bad question to ask, and I don't think he couldn't have asked it. I mean, unless maybe it did get crossed off before the interview, but I would have said this to him, Terry. You sacked Ten Hag, well done. Why did you appoint Ruben Amorim, who quite clearly plays a very distinctive style of football that this club has never played and is going to need very distinctive players that you don't have? Therefore, you're going to have to spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's the thing that worries me, because I still think we haven't got those players.
I would have loved that question because it's one that's mulling around in my head, and there's some negative connotations. There's some really positive trains of thought that I have. And it's only a theory because it's in my head, and I wonder why. I'd have loved that question to be asked. The other reason, though, why I don't want it to be questioned is this. One of the positive feelings I have is that they believe that Ruben Amorim is one of the next great managers. If he could build, and he does. And the problem is, I don't want the club to say that about him, though, because it builds a pressure. When Ten Hag said era's come to an end, it was a great, in the moment, we were like, yeah, go on, Ten Hag. But that was used against him for 2.5 years. I would rather that the club say nothing of the sort. I would rather them not answer the question and leave that particular area a little bit ambiguous, because I don't want additional pressure being applied to him. But my gut feeling is very much this. And this is why as well I'm not panicked yet, and maybe I'll be more I'll panic more next year. So I think bring him in mid-season. I think the players have been told in no uncertain terms, there's no more downing tools. There's no more, we don't want to play this way. You can moan all you want, but if you don't adapt, you're not good enough, you're gone. I think all of this has created a bit of a pushback subconsciously, consciously from other players, which is why the performances and the results have been very, very up and down under Ruben Amorim. But what I've been trying to look at since Ineos came in is differences. So as much as not everyone's happy about the stadium, well, it's a difference. Not everyone's happy, like myself, about the cuts, but we're operating in a different way. And when we heard Sir Jim say yesterday, the club kept on employing more and more people when it couldn't afford it, that makes you sit there and think, who the hell was running us in the first place? Like, whether you like Ineos or not, it doesn't make any sense to increase your outgoings by 200 million, but only increase the revenue by 100 million. So I'm seeing differences that I'm intrigued by. I see a difference in how even the results under Amorim have been compared to a lot of other managers' sort of knee-jerk starts. And my hope, and it is pure hope because I'm not internal and I don't have the answers because I'm a fan on the outside, is they see a manager that actually, if we start the process now, add 4 or 5 players of the right profile in the summer. What we're not doing in the summer of 2025 is starting flat-footed. And it might take until November, December for the drills and the training to really start making the team work. We've had 6 months before preseason of implementing what we want. And the hope is that next season we're further ahead than if we'd kept Ruud as an interim until the summer. That's what my hope is, that they would say in that moment. The fear would be, well, we don't know. We just think he's a good manager, and a really kind of bad answer. But I think a lot of this in terms of us, and this is what I would also say about our improvements. The results next year, I think, are going to change a lot of people's moods, because had Amorim come in and we were brilliant and we were currently sitting 4th, and now this stadium was announced, I think there'd be less scrutiny about it. And I think the results of the team on the pitch will dictate everybody's attitude towards a new stadium build, debt. We've saved around £75 million in cuts so far. That includes player salaries. £75 million of savings, if you amortize that over 5 years, is £375 million of money we have to spend on players based on the savings we've made so far. Now, we're never going to spend that amount in one summer, and we'd be stupid to. But if we're able to spend 200 million of that, what we save through reducing salaries, selling players, that doesn't include sales, by the way, you sell players as well, and all the costs that we've saved around the stadium. If we could have a summer where the recruitment is good and we say, oh, that new centre-back, those two new midfielders, that new 10, that new striker is working, we're suddenly 6th, 5th in the league, pushing for the top 4, looking like a good team that could become a great team with even more investment. That, I think, is what Ineos, Barada, Amrim need to fight for next season, because I think the results on the pitch will ease a lot of the pressure off of it, and maybe can just let them work with a little less scrutiny, on their shoulders, as it were. So this summer is absolutely massive, because if we buy badly, if we start the season poorly, with all the distrust towards the owners, the disdain we have for the Glazers, next season will be even harder than this one. So for them, listen, they're rightfully being scrutinized. I think fans have to keep the foot on their neck. Even though I'm supportive of some of their decisions, I don't believe in just ignoring them and letting them get on with it. We should be on their necks every day. But I think the recruitment this summer, in the short term, is the most important element for this club for the next 5 years, because if they have a terrible summer and waste another £200 million, that's where I'm totally in your camp, Mark. I don't see how we then start digging our way out and building a new stadium without massively cutting back from the first team. I think we've got a window where we can spend well, but we have to spend well.
Yeah, I mean, I think the summer, as I've said before, is a flip of a coin. I think he needs to be given £200 million. Let's not forget, it's his first summer as a new manager. It's a demand. He must be given that money because, let's be honest, Mourinho, Ten Hag, Ollie got it. But listening to Sir Jim, I'm not convinced the money's there. So I think it's a flip of the coin whether that money's even there. On one hand, it might be. On the other hand, it might be, well, I've told you there's no money and I'm selling Garnacho. So we'll have to wait and see that. Going back to what you said about the manager, you hope they know what they're doing. Or did they just appoint a new manager? My fear is I think they just thought he's a good manager, he'll do a good job. Because if they didn't, you and I know, and everybody watching knows, if you look at United's profile of team under Ten Hag, and you look at Amrim's profile of team at Sporting Lisbon, they are poles apart. So anybody who knows football would say you can sack Amrim, you can sack Ten Hag and get Amrim, but you do need at least £500 million over the next 2 years for him to change that team around. It's like turning a boat. It can't go in the same direction. So did they factor that in? My concern, as I say, is that all we ever hear about is cuts and there's no money. So why did they bring a manager in that they know they've got to spend money on? I think on the summer, though, it's again, what I would say is it's not just about purchases, it's about sales. And it was interesting. You mentioned it a couple of times that, you look at Rashford and Anthony. I think Amrim was behind that. And to be fair, he was backed, which we know Mourinho famously years ago said, I don't want Martial, I don't want Shaw. And the club were like, well, you're keeping them. So I will always applaud a manager being backed. It's amazing it's taken 10 years for that to happen. But they are on loan. Casemiro is still here. And he did say in that interview that I've got to pay for Onana, Rasmus, Sancho and Anthony in the summer. So you might think, well, he wants to get rid of all those players. But as we know, we're terrible at getting rid of players. And it's all right saying, I'm going to get rid of these players, or I'm going to hint at getting rid of these players. I think that's as important as spending the 200 million in the summer, because we're terrible at this. So look, Rashford will be easy to get rid of. Sancho, we've already done the deal, but Anthony, Lindelof and Eriksen are walking out with no contracts. I mean, that to me would be a massive step forward if we could actually start selling players. But as I said, Terry, I think the big problem we've got with the summer is that we won't do anything till July because of the financial year. Because if we didn't spend in January, we're not going to spend in June because that's the financial year. So we'll start spending in July. International tour will be mid-July. Pre-season will be first week of July. I don't see players coming in till August again. And then you're starting a season, like you say, where things might not start clicking till Christmas. And by that time, you're writing another season off. And I'm just worried about how many seasons we're going to write off.
Mate, listen, I hear you on that. I have the same concerns, and this is why I always think it's important, because I think on the surface, if you look at your tweets and my tweets, people would think that we completely see things differently. I see where you're coming from. I understand it, and they are my concerns too. The positive I would say is this: that the last summer is the most amount of money we've ever raised in the summer through selling players, which is an improvement. And again, I look for changes and what's different. I actually want the club to, no matter how poor we are in terms of cash, I want us to say we're even poorer. Because I actually think that, I feel that helps you get players at a cheaper price, especially if those players want to leave. Because typically when a player wants to leave a club, clubs will facilitate that. I think one of the biggest mistakes we made a decade ago was when Woodward came out and said, we can do things in the transfer market that nobody else can. I've always felt that led to clubs increasing that Man United tax and going, oh, really? Well, he was a 30
That only works,
player.
doesn't it? Like somebody in the chat just said, we're linked to Edison. That only works if you're the only customer in the shop.
No, I agree.
And if Man City and Liverpool want Edison and we want him, we ain't getting him, are we? So
no, I agree with that, mate. And I think that's where I feel that there isn't any, like, yes, I want us to plead poverty because I think it helps reduce the price of players. At the same time, if you're in a bidding war with somebody else, you're going to pay a price. What we need to make sure we don't do is end up like we did it with Maguire. We got into a bidding war with Man City. I think we both agreed similar prices, but City said we'll pay in installments, and we said we'd pay upfront cash, which meant we were 87 million euros down, or whatever that is, 75 million pounds down in cash straight away. Those are the types of mistakes we have to avoid. So, was he worth that amount of money? Absolutely not. He's been a good centre back at times for us. He's had some calamity moments as well. But if we'd have paid what he was worth, and that was around 45, 50 million, there'd have been money left to rectify or buy better or add to it. And that's what we need to get better at sometimes is, look, we know we really want that midfielder, but is he really worth 90 million just because Liverpool are bidding it, or just because Tottenham are willing to pay that money? I'm not saying Spurs would spend 90 million. That's where we need to be clever in these circumstances. And for years, one thing I've said to fans, and it's ironic that we're now talking about it from the other direction, this notion of it's not my money, I don't care. Now you should, because if you just overspend and undersell, you run out of cash. It's something we need to be far more. We need to scrutinize far more the price we're paying for players than ever before. We've got to reduce what we spend and increase what we sell for as best we can. Because again, that just generates, over a 3-year period, that might generate 2 extra players for your squad that you need versus having this black hole. So look, I get where you're coming from. It's a massive summer. The sales are a big thing as well. And that's why I don't know about you, all these players that we have out on loan, I've seen some United fans go, why are we hyping up what Anthony's doing? Keep hyping it, everyone. Because when La Liga,
Rashford,
exactly, when La Liga, this is where I don't mind the media. Like sometimes I do think we don't control the own narrative about our club well enough, and we side, because I keep saying it on my shows. I ain't siding with the media, even if they agree with something I say. Where were they for 20 years about the Glazers when they were calling us sport brats for moaning? They ain't our friends now. They're not our friends at all. Don't let the fox in the hen house. Equally, where I will side with the media is when La Liga and all the Spanish publications saying Man United are idiots for not getting the best out of Anthony. Let's retweet it. Let's retweet it. Let's push that narrative, because how can Real Betis go, we only want to pay 20 million when your own league is saying he's a superstar? No, you're paying us 60. We might get that. We might get 50. And this is where United fans sometimes play the game a little bit, but play the game in favor of your own club. Please. Just once. Just once.
It's like those people who want Rashford to fail, and I'm like, no, I want him to go, but I want him to score. I hope he scores tonight. Like, I want him to play well, because then Barcelona are there, Villa are there. You get a 5 million more. It just helps you out, and money is so tight at the moment. Andy Atherton says Mark and Terry the goats together on United stand. Thank you very much for that. Macedonian says the last time Man United won the league, my dad had a full head of hair. We need to get those Glazers out. Unapologetic says, invest in a stadium, but not the team. Just think in 5 years' time, we can lose all our home games in a shiny new stadium, still debted up to our eyeballs. Well, look, I think that's what we've spent the last hour talking about, really. Yeah. It's the stadium will be great whenever it happens, but what happens in between then? In fact, actually, what happens when you built it? Like, because Arsenal had no money for 10 years. So these are things that need to be learnt and fleshed out and questioned. An issue I had with the interview is I heard a lot about improving Man United, the business, and very little about improving Man United, the football team. I think that's a great point by Patrick. I don't think we've had the questions about as we mentioned about Amrin. Andy Hale says, stadium announced to justify season ticket prices hikes. They normally announce next season's. They are going to hike the prices on the season tickets. I've heard that from very good authority. So yeah, get ready for that. I think that was inevitable anyway. I'm with you on thinking about this stadium, but just a question to Summer. And what would you say if it works and United start to do well again? Mate, I don't look. My negativity 100% always is very constant. If you don't understand me or you get angry with me and Goldbridge is losing it, as some people were saying last night, let me just give you a little key to the recipe, right? Glazers. They annoy the shit out of me. I can't stand them. I can't believe what they've done to the football club, and I can't stand the fact they're going to be here for 20 years. That's my main frustration. And I actually think that Sir Jim's just a puppet of them after that interview last night, which actually makes me hate the Glazers even more. But mate, you've seen me when Man United win. Like, I can separate that. I've seen Man United win the Champions League with the Glazers. So trust me, I want this team to win. I am not the person that wants this team to fall apart. I think we might be in a worse situation next year or in 2 years. It's very realistic. But I want us to do well. Like, life's too short to want to get proved right on failure. I want to get proved wrong on success. Anders says, Sir Jim Radcliffe said he will unequivocally back Amram in the summer, but also has to back the decisions of the recruitment team. Barada, Wilcox, that's concerning. Hey, fair point, isn't it, Terry? At the end of the day, I got told by somebody this week who I respect that they'd been told a long time ago by Man City people that Barada ain't all that. Wilcox came in from Southampton. Look, they might be under the radar at the moment, but their time will come in the summer. The scrutiny will come. There's a lot. Look, there's a lot that's got to go right at United. A lot. And only one thing's got to go wrong to pour it all down. So percentage-wise of us getting back is far from a bloody guarantee anyway.
What I would say to Anders in that comment is that this is where I agree with Sir Jim. You've already stated, Mark, and we all agree. I think he stayed away from the footballing conversation because he's not a football man. He's a fan of football. If you got him to speak about being a petrochemist, I bet he could. I mean, he'd bore the socks off you, but I bet he could speak about that in intricate detail. I bet he could break down a business plan and speak about it amazingly, but he's not a football person. And I don't want the owners of our clubs, bankers, marketing experts speaking football. At the same time, his job is to hire people like Barada and Wilcott that are meant to know what they're doing on a footballing level. I would be more worried about a billionaire petrochemist overruling the key football decision makers than I would be trusting the key football decision makers. I think in the last 12 years, one of our biggest mistakes was letting bankers and marketing experts make footballing decisions over that of the qualified football professional. So I think that you have to have that hierarchy in there as an example, and you have to kind of trust them to get it right. So for me, I get that point from Anders that it's concerning, but I think it's all in one. Amarim, Barada, and Wilcott need to agree on a direction, and then they just need Sir Jim and, of course, the Glazers to sign off on spending that money. That's the right way to work it. I think it becomes problematic in the long term if a non-footballing senior decision maker is overruling the football decision makers they brought into the club, because then what's the point of having them? We might as well save the salary and give the free lunches back if Sir Jim's making the decisions. So I'm not against that process personally.
Yeah. Big summer ahead. Look, I've got to go and pick Seb up from school. You've got a show at 3:30. So we'll call it there. But I like these. I mean, I don't get to do them very often. And I know that last night, it's a shame we couldn't do it last night, but I was already live. But yeah, look, there is a, I think that I actually genuinely think there's a lot of emotion. We're living in a society at the moment where people are screaming and shouting, I told you so, I told you so. And as I said there, it was a good point from Anders, because he's like, what if it works? I don't think it will work. But as I said, I'd rather Man United be successful and I'd be wrong than Man United be fail and I'd be right. And I think that explains it best of all, because I just want Man United to win. But my big frustration, as is many, is the Glazers. And they own the football club. And I think a lot of people watched that interview yesterday and were like, I like Sir Jim. He's a poster boy for the Glazers. That's what he is. He doesn't own the football club. They do. They are going to be here, and we've just got to find a way to work through it, because I think they've never been in a stronger position than they are now. That when you think about it, they've got exactly what they want with the regeneration project. And if they valued Man United at 5 billion 18 months ago, today it's got to be worth 6 just on what's going to happen in 5 years' time. And when it's built, it's got to be worth 8. And if we start being successful, it's going to be worth over 10. So look, that's just how business works. And they've obviously got what they were planning. I always wondered what it was that they valued Man United at such a high price. And they were obviously sitting on this. And that's why I think Qatar was saying, we only want to pay 4. But I think the Glazers were sat there going, look, we've got this thing that we've been working on for a long time. And
yeah. No, mate, I hear you. I hear you completely. And I think that this is why nothing you've said about the Glazers I disagree with. So as Jay Fader says, I'm with you on the Glazers and everything else. But there was a reason that the Qataris I wanted, you wanted, wouldn't pay the asking price because they didn't see it being worth that. The positive side, and this isn't a positive towards the Glazers, is with this new stadium, maybe what you'll find, and again, this is hope, maybe then a Qatari group or a group from Elon Musk, somebody goes, you know what, it might be worth that 6 billion now because they've got these plans in place. No, maybe not. Maybe not. But listen, I always think the price is right, and the more we have planned for the future.
Would you sell something for 6 billion if you knew in 5 to 10 years it might be worth 10?
Probably not. But at the same time, if this is where I look at, if we want new owners, this is where I don't necessarily always blame Ineos, because at the same time, you're not also going to get a new owner that buys a club that they think's worth 4 billion that they're asking 6 for it, or they're not going to give you 6 billion if the asking price is 8 billion. It becomes a bit of a trade-off on those two things. I do think the annoying bit is the Glazers will profit and benefit, and that's the only sticking point. But I think the better situation the club is in, on the pitch, off the pitch, financially, new stadium, there is a higher chance of a new owner buying and taking over at a price they would demand. The only gut-wrenching bit for me is the Glazers make more money. The only other way around is for fans to crash the value of the football club. But as we know, fans aren't prepared to do that. So it's either the Glazers are going to make billions by selling it to somebody for more than it's worth, or we have to drive the price of the club down. I think if we just stick where we are, that's where we are. That's the reality. Does that make sense? It's someone's either going to overpay, which is unlikely, or we've got to run the price down, which is unlikely. The middle ground is where we are, and I don't see a way out of it other than what they're doing now, which is not ideal for any of us, really, mate. It's frustrating.
We'll just finish on this super chat from JD. He says, the problem with the long-term vision is the fuzzy grey bits in between the destination. Let's wait and watch whether optimistic or pessimistic. To be honest, mate, I don't want to be like this because it's not how I live my life. I don't think we've got any choice other than to wait and see. And there's going to be plenty of interesting discussions along the way. I don't think it would matter if somebody had seen the future and knew it was going to go wrong. I don't think we can change that future. We're just going to have to wait and watch. Exactly. Thanks for coming on, Terry. Really appreciate that. He normally does Thursday night show, but it's Europa League this week. I knew there was something there. So there we go.
Yeah, no worries.
But I think you're on That's Football tomorrow night, actually, doing the watch along.
Oh, yes, I'm doing a watch along for you. Yes. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me because I forgot. But yes, I'm doing it.
Lovely stuff.
Yeah. There we go.
Okay, well, thanks everyone for tuning in. Nice little different show on a Tuesday at 2. I'm back at 7 tonight because it's Champions League night. Thanks for coming on, Terry.
Lovely, not a problem at all. And I'll see everyone soon.
Lovely stuff. Take care. That's the thing with these streams. They